You've seen the headlines, right? Some startup raises a crazy amount of money, and everyone thinks, wow, they've made it. But what if that's not the whole story? What if, for the founder, that giant number in the headline is actually the least important one? Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on the brutal truths of modern venture, where success is absolutely not what it seems. And this right here, this is the one idea that changes the entire game for any founder. It forces you to shift your brain away from chasing those flashy headlines and to start focusing on what really, truly matters. What's your actual take home at the end of the day? This is the core tension we're going to unpack. Let's just be super clear about this. The whole economic vibe has shifted, big time. Those days of walking into a room with just a cool story and a vague promise of growth, yeah, they're gone. The market has sobered up, and now a whole new, much tougher set of rules is in play. So here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about why the party's officially over. Then we'll get into something called the billion-dollar trap. After that, we'll hit some hard truths about first impressions and your product. And we'll wrap it all up with the real rules of the game today. All right, let's kick things off by digging into why that old startup playbook is basically useless now. The very foundation of how this world worked has pretty much crumbled. You know, it wasn't that long ago that a fancy background, slapping ex-Google or ex-Facebook on your pitch deck, was like a golden ticket. Not anymore. Investors today, they want to see substance. They want real traction, a clear path to actually making money. A shiny resume just isn't going to keep the lights on. Okay, now for what might be the biggest myth in all of venture capital. This idea that a massive valuation automatically equals a huge payday for the founder. Let's see how that myth falls apart. So you see a number like this blasted all over the news. $3 billion. A unicorn 3 times over. The media goes nuts, calls it a massive success. This, my friends, is the hype. But then, you see this number. This is the reality. For the founder of that same $3 billion company, the actual cash in their pocket was just $20 million. Now, why such a huge gap? Well, it's because of things hidden in the fine print, like liquidation preferences. That's a fancy term for investors getting their money back first. So yeah, $20 million is a life-changing amount of money, but it's a tiny, tiny fraction of that headline number. The lesson here is so important. The public story is all about celebrating the big fundraise, but the private reality, it's all about surviving the exit. It's about swimming through the sharks of the term sheet, the stuff that decides who gets paid first and who gets what's left. The public story and the private math are two completely different worlds. Okay, so with all that in mind, let's dive into our first brutal truth. This is all about how investors judge you from the very, very first moment. 7 seconds. That is literally all the time you get. On average, that's how long an investor spends looking at your pitch deck before they either decide to keep reading or just hit delete. It's called the 7-second rejection rule, and it means you have absolutely no time to warm up. Your hook has to be instant, and it has to be powerful. All right, our next brutal truth is all about being smart with your time and money. And honestly, it's gonna sound completely backward. When you're just starting, your product is not the first thing you should be building. This right here sums up the new mindset perfectly. Before you burn through a ton of cash and time building something, you have to prove, I mean really prove, that somebody out there will actually pay for it. The strategy is to sell the idea, the concept, the promise, all packaged in something as simple as a PDF. So here's how it actually works. Step 1, you create a really compelling offer. A document that clearly lays out the problem you solve and the value you bring. Step 2, you go out and find a real paying customer based only on that offer. They signed a contract, maybe even prepay. And then, step 3, you use that validation and, more importantly, that cash to go and build the product. It just takes all the risk out of the equation. So let's pull all this together. What does this new world actually demand from founders? It's a total mindset shift. It's time to start obsessing over your real exit. This is the key question for every single founder out there today. If the old playbook is trash, what does the new one even look like? How do you actually win in this much tougher environment? And here it is, pretty much our whole journey summed up in a new playbook. It's simple, really. You've got to obsess over your exit math, not the fundraising number. You have to understand every single line of that deal. Sell first, then build. You have to absolutely nail your first 7 seconds. And you have to be willing to face the tough truths that most people in the startup world won't say out loud. And that brings us to the ultimate question you have to ask yourself. When all the hype dies down, who is this success story really for? Because look, a company that's a huge win for your investors but not for you, that's not a victory. The real goal is to build a success story where you're a main character.